Hey everyone. So I was asked to present a little bit to you about writing an op-ed. Some of you may have seen me present on this in person, but I thought I would just create a video since I can't be with you today. And this will also give you a chance to just pause at certain points and actually do the thing that we're going to be doing. So before we get to that, just a little bit about me. Um, so, so I'm Dr. Milne, first generation college student. You can see where I got my degrees here, and then I have a book that was published in 2021, and then another one that's probably going to come out next year, so 2026. And you can see the titles there. You can also find more about me on my website. So, as far as an op-ed article is concerned, I thought we would just kind of go over like what the genre is, and then I'll walk you through steps on how to do one on your own or in small groups if you're interested in that. So, as far as what they are, so op-ed is short for opinion editorial. So opinion editorial articles, op-eds, they essentially allow you to develop your expertise. So you usually start out by saying, as someone who has had many years of experience taking care of horses, or as someone who specializes in insert your discipline here, right? So that's part of what you're kind of doing when you're framing yourself as a writer of an op-ed. This is with a very specific purpose of encouraging positive change by drawing attention, as I say here, to some issue or aspect of society that you think is important. And hopefully you could tell by my examples that these vary in topics. So some of them can be kind of popular culture, others can be more related to your major or your discipline. Um, and for a lot of you, I assume it'll also be related to maybe campus issues, either specifically at UIndy or just at universities in general. The good thing about these is they're usually pretty short. So most of your op-eds, and I'll show you some examples in a moment, most of them are going to be between 700 to 800 words. There's rare occasions where it would go longer, and there's quite a number of situations where it might go shorter, but this is typically the range. They are addressed to a much broader public, so these are different from, say, your papers that you write for your classes, which assume that the person that's reading this knows what you're talking about, right? So sometimes it can feel very basic because you're explaining concepts that to you are things that you're experts in, but that's part of the challenge of the op-ed, or part of the fun of the op-ed, is you're kind of translating what you know and love and feel to a much broader audience. So some of the main elements of an op-ed, and then we'll also go over some best practices. Um, Op-eds are always going to have an introduction paragraph called a lead, and this is usually tied to some kind of contemporary news story or recent issue. In your 101 writing classes or your 101 English classes, this is sometimes referred to as a hook. Um, it's going to draw the reader in, but also hopefully very quickly let them know what it is they're reading. Um, and what it is that they should do. So you'll have this moment where the reader is kind of called to action, and we'll talk more about that in a second because this happens usually at the beginning and at the end. Um, Maybe very short body paragraphs, so much shorter than your kind of typical report or essay. So a lot of times with your kind of university essays, you're counseled to write at least 5 sentences or whatever it is, because you're writing kind of more journalistic style, usually a few sentences each paragraph, and we'll kind of do a little bit of a breakdown of what those paragraphs might entail. Um, a lot of times they'll also link, so you'll have like links to other kind of news sources, and this is also where you make a case for your credibility as a writer. So um, you want to think through what you're kind of saying is who you're saying is your company in terms of thinking about publications. Usually at some point there's a paragraph where you acknowledge the other side of the argument or debate, and then you say why you're still right. Um, and then there's a concluding paragraph. So this is where you make your real call to action. Um, now that you've convinced us that what you're drawing attention to is important for us to notice, what should the reader do about it? And it shouldn't be something vague. So avoid saying, you should be more aware. And instead think of something a bit more specific, maybe tied to a current event or tied to an anniversary that's coming up, um, or something like that. So we'll look at some examples in a moment. Really, part of this is also doing the same thing that you would do with your essays, which is kind of saying, here's what I've just said and why you should feel good about the thing that you just read. And then the call to action, like I said, it needs to have a very specific idea behind it. So it can be something like I have here. So vote no on Idaho House Bill 2214, or volunteer for the National Foundation for Human Trafficking by contacting this number, rather than this idea of, you should do more about this. You want there to be some real purpose behind what you're writing. In terms of topics, so this can go in any number of directions. I would suggest that you pause on this slide and think through what are some of the topics you're passionate about. Issues, problems, trends. This can be, again, this can be something where it's like popular culture. This can be something specific to your campus or to university students in general. Think about your clubs, your hobbies. Think about regions. So think about, what might be specific to the Midwest versus other regions. So professionally and personally, as I say here. An example, so I'll be showing you later one of Dr. Miller's op-eds. So she's in the sociology department, and she focuses a lot on cohabitation and family in terms of her research. So a lot of her op-eds talk about that. At the same time, she's also a human being, just like all of us, and she has other things that she has expertise in. And so I think this is a good opportunity for you guys to think about what you are experts in, what you're passionate about, and kind of go from there. In terms of issues, just to give you some examples, so I said something about riding horses earlier, so maybe you want to promote an RSO on horse riding. Or maybe you notice that the way that the university handles a particular issue needs to be addressed, and you have some ideas about how to address it. Or maybe you feel that in this case, our campus or our city is underrated and we should support it more by doing whatever that call to action is. So yeah, I would say at this point, it would be good to potentially pause and just list ideas, and then we can talk through on the next slide about how to potentially narrow down those ideas. So yeah, what excites you most? What needs to be urgently addressed? In terms of choosing your topics, from there, I would try to decide what is the point you want to make. So if you are very much into sticker collecting, what is the point you want to make about that? If you know that there's the 50th anniversary of one of your favorite movies, what's the point you want to make about that, right? Here's where you want to think about audience, because even though this is the broad public, you are going to be addressing somebody who would continue to read your op-ed after reading that first paragraph or that lead. So who are you trying to convince of what? And then you'll also want to think through data and facts. Again, your credible sources that you cite are going to show you to also be a credible author. And so you don't want to just cite Jim Bob's website. You want to actually cite something, maybe even something that is in the kind of target of where you would hope this would be published beyond her campus. So when I write for Newsweek, I link to other Newsweek articles. So think about how you're going to do that. When it comes to writing the actual op-ed, I often tell people to start at the end. So thinking through what that call to action is, what should be done, may be the way to kind of get you to work backwards to think through these other steps. So in our the op-ed project that a bunch of your professors participated in, so it was this year-long workshop, they often suggested we do something known as a 15-minute op-ed, which is how I would think for you guys to frame it for your meeting. Maybe you start at the end uh, and you start with your specific ask. Right, so what is the call to action? Here, you can then move on to the middle and think through, I say here, 3 points of evidence. So 3 pieces of evidence as to why your reader should care. These should be different and they should be short, right? So you'll recall I said that you probably want to keep each paragraph to a few sentences. And then in terms of that evidence, I would say, you can pause here, think about finding at least 2 good articles about your topic, and they should be somehow related and inform your topic even further. So, again, you're trying to convince somebody, and so this will provide more information about that. In terms of evidence, I already said that you guys can think through your expertise on a personal professional level, so you can give an example from your own experience. And so I have some examples here as a student athlete or as a nursing major or as someone who has collected stamps since I was 4 years old. Right. And then you're working your way back. So now we're back at the beginning. Again, you'll want to think through some kind of recent thing that is happening. These usually move very fast. So unlike kind of normal academic publishing or book publishing, I mentioned that my book is taking like a couple of years to come out. These are usually one and done, and then an editor is putting them out almost immediately, if not by the end of the week kind of thing. Usually for those kind of, like your kind of Newsweek or your U.S. News and World Report, they're moving very fast. For you guys, obviously, it's very different because you're in control of this, but that's something to kind of keep in mind is you want it to be recent because these are going to be very recently published and read. Again, you might want to take the time to pause and think through maybe like an upcoming, like I said, an upcoming anniversary or an upcoming event that you can kind of link to as far as your introduction. There are a bunch of links here, and I think you can just kind of Google these. As usual, I will send the PowerPoint to your leaders so that they can also send these links to you, basically walking you through all the things that I just discussed. So as far as examples, I decided to choose some examples from some of your professors. And I mentioned Dr. Miller earlier, so I thought I'd start with one from her. So the headline here, and this is one that's co-written. A lot of these are actually co-written, so you can think about, I would say no more than 3, and 3 might be pushing it. If you're thinking about, say, a Newsweek article, for example, they really don't want you to kind of do a lot of co-authoring. But I think two is pretty normal. And then obviously there's lots of single authored op-eds. But anyway, this one is talking about work-life balance when it comes to holidays. This is one from Dr. Fohl in arts. And notice she is an art professor, but she's here talking about kind of a personal issue related to disability. This is one of mine. So as you saw from my opening slide, I talk a lot about literature. So I'm usually talking about novels, poems, poetry, plays, etc. In this case, I'm broadening that out. And this is for Ms. Magazine. Here's one from Drs. Wynn and Ziff, talking about feminism. And I'm giving you also the publication so you can see the different places where these op-eds are showing up. So this one, Inside Higher Ed, obviously very specific to colleges and universities. But the connection here is at the time that this was written, a bunch of the actors in Hollywood were on strike. So this is by Professor McKenna, who's in English, and then Drs. Wynn and Ziff, who are in sociology. Dr. Ferreira, who's in global languages, she is not writing about Spanish here, she's writing about bike riding. So part of her contribution to this one was, and actually she's written multiple op-eds and has done a few radio spots talking about bicycle safety in Indianapolis and beyond. And then here's one from Dr. Wilson, very much within her within her expertise as a political scientist, talking about voter participation. Here's another one of mine. This was in Newsweek. And then I think I have a couple more. So this one is from Dr. Nguyen talking about housing, and this one is actually another example of somebody writing within their expertise. Um, Lori Williams, who's in music, so combining here gender and music equality. And then finally, Kendra Thomas talking about early education. So just a few examples for you. Um, you all have my email hopefully by this point, so feel free to email me if you have any questions, and I hope to see you around campus.